Hey guys, today I interview Evan Koster, a highly proficient public land hunter and guide that worked for me for, I believe, 7 years of guiding when I was outfitting in the flat tops of Colorado. This is a unique interview because Evan's track record is proven in this specific space. Evan has been involved in guiding directly himself or harvesting bulls himself on over 50 successful hunts in over-the-counter units, mostly wilderness. He's focused on the type of hunting that you guys ask me about all the time. Over-the-counter archery, over-the-counter rifle, very low point draw type of units. Really tough elk to hunt. In this interview, we focus on archery elk hunting in those units. I'm going to have to do another follow-up interview with them on the rifle seasons and focusing on that. But in this interview, really, we talk about archery, and that goes from finding elk all the way through his calling strategies to killing elk, and then what he does even after that. Oh, and just so you guys know, if you want to dive in right into the tactics, right into this strategy, skip the first 20, 25 minutes here. We'll go right into archery elk hunting. The first part, we talk about some more general concepts. But if you want the nitty gritty stuff, just jump forward to that. You're not going to offend me. Let's get right into it. If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there. I'll have some cool new merchandise, shirts, hats, all of that coming out soon in the next couple months. So get on there and subscribe to my email list. I'll put out the details there. But enough with that. Let's get to the episode. All right, Evan, dude, super pumped to have you on. How long has it been, man, since we met? Like 11, 12 years, something like that?
I was just looking at this painting back there, or this photograph behind me, 2014, and I think that was the year I started working for you.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild, man. So it's crazy because I don't know if you remember that period of time, but I remember that period of time actually fairly vividly. And one of my mindsets at that time was still like, hey, dude, at some point in my life, I'm going to grow up and have to get a real fucking job, you know? But I think now I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, that's never going to happen. This is life, dude. Do you
Uh,
ever think about the same thing?
Back then in 14, I was single on the loose. I was living in a camper on my parents' ranch. Now I've got 2 kids and a wife, and I'm still doing the same damn thing on the same damn mountain.
But dude, you have to view it as
I love it. No,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was by choice. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a blessing, man. Like I talk to so many young guys that I think would love to make a career out of guiding or outfitting or whatever. And for the listeners, it's so hard.
Yeah.
There's so many the opportunities to do that are so limited out there. And yeah, man, I think at least for me, I'm very grateful that I've been able to continue guiding, continue staying in the hunting world, and it's cool to see you, Jimmy, a bunch of the old guys that I kind of got rolling on this whole thing, kind of doing the same thing. It's pretty awesome, man. I think it's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all the sacrifice is kind of worth it if what's important to you is your way of life, your day-to-day. Um, I get to go on the mountain every single day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've made sacrifices to do that. I probably don't have the wealth that I could have elsewhere, but
Sure.
by God, I'm happy.
Well, dude, it's weird when we're gonna make this about, just so the viewers know, we're gonna make this about, from my perspective, Evan, is we're gonna pick your brain, and it's gonna be all about like
Cool.
tactical strategy stuff to help guys that are doing the type of hunting that you do personally, and also you guide these public land, really pressured elk type of hunts. We're gonna dive into that, but I got to start out with like a woo woo thing that I wonder if you ever think about, man. Because I've actually, since I got out of the outfitting and I'm doing less guiding now, one thing that I've realized, at least like moving into this social media kind of whatever this world that I'm in now, is that it sounds crazy, Evan, but like you taking guys hunting or when I take guys hunting, there's like a moment there where you can actually change a dude's life, particularly if they like haven't been exposed to this type of hunting. Whereas you can't sell gear to a guy and change his life. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Uh,
that go ahead.
Talking about like the evolution of a young guide to a career guide, and what keeps you in it, right? Uh, it for when I was young, I just wanted to kill elk. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
wanted to
sure.
be the guy that was awesome and could kill elk. Anymore, the most fulfilling part of my job is exactly what you're talking about, like just sharing this experience with somebody and seeing them do it and realize their own accomplishment. Um, and I mean, same goes for like young guides, helping these guys figure out how to make it click continuously.
Right.
That's become like what I enjoy most. It isn't the killing elk anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It's changing people's lives a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the
Yeah.
thing is that I think I've come to realize, like, now that I've been able to like step back from it a little bit, Evan, it's pretty unique to your type of hunting. It's the type of hunts that are really hard. Like they're
Yeah, you have to
hard.
dig.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you very rarely get like the day one, kill one, it's all
Yeah.
good type of thing. And I'm not crapping on that type of hunting, dude. I've been doing a bunch of that type of guiding. Like it's fun, but that kind of like life changing, like, oh, okay, this is like a real psychological, physical, whatever combination goal is it's like
Yeah.
that type of hunting, man.
Yep.
So I just wanted to get your thought on it. And that's interesting that, yeah, you think about it the same way that, as I
Yeah,
do.
like I said, it's my favorite part of it now, is watching how a hard elk hunt and overcoming it and being successful, how it affects people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
cool. I
absolutely.
had a guy last year sitting on the side of the mountain. He killed his first bull, and he said, I shit you not, Cliff. He said it was one of the most memorable days of his life, right? And the guy is married, he has kids, he's had some
Yeah, yeah.
incredible good days, but killing a bull elk was up there.
Yeah, of course.
That's badass.
Yeah, it's awesome, man.
It's fun to be a part of.
It's awesome, and, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think the hunting world, particularly like, archery, elk hunting in wilderness areas and that sort of thing, do you think it's changed a lot in the last, like, 15 years, Evan, from your
Yeah.
perspective? Yeah, well, give me a feel for what your thoughts are on that, because I have my own, but I wanna hear yours.
For one, like your stuff is a great. There's so much good information out there coming from so many people that I think the baseline hunter is just better than ever before. Right?
Yeah,
People are going further. They're hunting harder. They have better knowledge. Um, and we have to compete with like it or not, we compete with one another.
sure.
You're just having to compete with more good hunters who are deeper in the backcountry,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, like the game.
and like more capable.
Yeah. Yeah, when people I mean, it's a really good point, man. When people say to me like, "Oh, like, these guys are not as tough as they used to be or whatever." I'm like, "Dude, that's I think just factually incorrect."
Yeah, yeah.
I
I,
think guys are on the skill set plus the gear front, you know what I mean?
my grandpa was Colorado native, born in Salida. He was a badass mountain guy. He killed sheep, goats, deer, and
Sure.
elk. And I always looked up to him as the greatest. And I didn't really know him, right? He died when I was young, but what I'd heard about him, I always assumed he was just the greatest outdoorsman to ever grace the face of the earth.
Right.
Uh, I know I'm better, right? Because I've
Yeah.
had to be. He didn't have to be. The deer hunting was phenomenal in his day.
Yeah.
Nobody was hunting. I think today's generation of hunter is probably better equipped and more capable than ever before.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. I totally agree, and part of it's information, part of it's just, like, the competition, everything else.
Yeah.
Dude, I have a like, I always have this tension around gear, Evan, because to me, dude, like, now it's very apparent to me. Like, when I was in your position, man, when I was running the outfit that now you run, I didn't realize how the whole hunting world, even this Western, elk hunting world, and this happened during our time, man, like, in the last, 10, 15 years, how everything became commercialized on the gear front.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's intense, man.
yeah.
And it's weird because I feel tension about it in the sense that it does guys are better equipped, but man, I worry so much or not worry, but I always like hesitate to focus on it too much because I think people's natural inclination is to just spend like hours and hours and hours optimizing that part of the deal. And it's interesting, man. Do you notice that in your clients?
I just answered an email this morning, Cliff, from a guy that's considering doing a drop camp archery elk hunt,
Yeah.
but he wants to push it back. He wanted me to send him a gear list first because he's going to have to push it back a couple years until he can accumulate the gear. And
Yeah. That's like
I
that's
was like,
yeah.
man, I'll send you a gear list, but look, it's just recommendations. You don't need most of that shit, and you're
Yeah.
better off just to go hunting right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, dude. And that you I mean, you nailed it, Evan, is I mean, anybody listening to this, if you're intimidated by the gear thing, I know it's hard because we're all like psychologically manipulated by all this marketing,
yeah,
including myself. Like it's not like me or you is excluded from that. But man, if you feel like that's hindering you, absolutely fall on the side of going hunting.
yeah.
Like a hundred
That's the
fold.
one place, right, where our grandfathers were better hunters than us. They got by with nothing, just fine,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
and
Yeah, yeah.
and we're capable of it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Um, but no, interesting stuff. But let's dive right in here, dude. So, Evan, you are interesting, and me and you are different in this way because you're very elk centric and you're very public
Yeah,
land elk centric. Do you have any idea how many bulls you've been a part of killing on public land? You got like a
yeah.
rough number?
I do know with the outfit. With the outfit, it's around 30.
Hmm. And
Uh,
then you've killed. I know you
and then
hunt a bunch
hunting
of.
for myself, right, and with family and friends and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, dude. So I'm gonna.
yeah, probably
I,
neighborhood of 50, something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
So I'm gonna give you an ego pump, dude, because and then we're gonna dive into your thoughts on everything. Dude, it's crazy to think. So 40, 50 bull elk all on public land, all on stuff that's 10, 15% success rate at most, right? So dude,
Yeah.
if you do like a little funky math, Evan, you probably have you have like 400 years or 300 years of like the average guy's hunting experience, right? Have you ever thought it's crazy to think about, man?
Man, sometimes it feels like I have 400 years weighing me down.
Yeah, but you do, dude. With that many successful hunts in these type of
Yeah, yeah,
environments, it's that's what it amounts to. And I think I say that, dude, one, so people kind of understand who you are and where some of the stuff we're talking about is going to come from, but also so people understand how hard it is. I mean, you've dedicated your whole freaking life to this, right? Like you said,
yep,
you've made sacrifices and everything
yep,
else. I think like a guy who's trying to get better at this and that's his primary goal as a hobby or like an extreme hobby for him, he has to put that in perspective. Like,
yep,
with the gear stuff, just like you don't have to buy every piece of gear, you don't have to sweat like every freaking detail of every stock, every, win situation or whatever. It's just going to take you time, take you
yep.
iteration to figure it out. So that's part of the reason I say that, man. But let's dive in, dude. What's the I mean, let's start with archery stuff. Because I get more archery questions now. It's growing than anything.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to over the counter, or nowadays a lot of these things are changing to 1 point, 2 point unit in Colorado. If I'm right now in June, what's your what would you tell a guy that's going on his first or second archery outcome? What does he need to do preparation wise, Evan?
Yeah, being in shape is the most obvious, right? And I know not everybody's coming from, not everybody's working outside with their hands. If you've got an office job, you better be in the gym.
Sure.
I think, personally, I feel like, and I don't, I might catch some flack for this, but I think a lot of guys waste effort on weight training when you really should focus on cardio.
Yeah.
If you got good cardio, you're gonna get by, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You
uh,
notice how much better guys do in camp too if they're not
oh
getting
yeah,
totally at.
totally. And I see guys that do a lot of weight training, right? That are muscled up, ripped, they got veins coming down their neck. That my skinny ass can outwalk all day long, right? They're
Yeah.
carrying that muscle mass around with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, just run, walk, uh, lose your breath, get your lungs in shape, and like the kind of like, when you get the coughs, Cliff, when you've
Yeah.
like been running so hard you get the coughs. I
Yeah.
think you need to do that over and over and over again, so that when you come to elevation and you're working your tail off, that's not something new and scary for you.
Yeah, yeah, dude, I think you nailed it in a very, unscientific way, which is
Yeah,
exactly
that's all I know.
dude, which is exactly how I describe it, Evan. Like, I don't know, I try to do a little research on this or whatever. I think what we're talking about is like hitting like high VO2 maxes. You can't, you don't do, or excuse me, like trying to get your VO2 max up higher, but you can't do that unless some sort of your preparation gets you to the point that you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
coughs, or like where you literally can't go any further, right?
yeah,
Dude, and I was talking to a couple of guys about this recently. Guys that like you as an individual are unique because you're up in the mountains, you're working up in the
yeah,
mountains, you're getting your heart
yeah,
rate up all the time. But people who just work out, even if they're doing cardio part of their workouts, they don't actually tend to hit that often. But what I notice guys who are athletes, and I don't mean like 20-year-old athletes. I mean guys that
yeah,
are 50, they play tennis, they do
yep,
jujitsu, they play, and they, because of the competition, they're hitting that like threshold of like
yep.
that stuff. You have to get to that. Or you
Yeah, I mean, I remember it from athletics in high school, right? Like wind sprints is what
yeah.
gets you feeling that way. The kind of respiratory exhaustion where you got to put your hands up on top of your head,
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Because you're
Uh,
right, like, you're gonna hit it.
Walking around the lake at home in the neighborhood with a backpack on isn't enough.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder, man, I'm sure there's somebody smarter that has a better, insight on this, but I wonder if part of that's mental and then part of it's also physical. It's just
Yeah.
you're not constantly like hitting that wall, so, you're almost like afraid of it because man, these hunts like you're gonna do that. And man, have you noticed that guys who get, if they haven't been doing that, they get like amongst your clients, they get exhausted like the first day or 2, and then they never come back.
Yeah. 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 No, I've seen that. And also, I mean, I kind of alluded to it, but also it's like some people are just uncomfortable feeling that way. Like it scares them when they
Yeah.
feel their heart rate rise and their lungs begin to hurt. Like there is just like becoming comfortable with being
Yeah.
whoa, being
Yeah,
out of
yeah, sure.
breath.
Yep. No, totally agree, and I think, dude, you're at like this is another thing I've realized, like, stepping away from the outfitting business that you now run, like, your guys' hunting is high altitude. It like and
Yeah.
I know this
Yeah.
sounds naive, Evan,
Yeah,
but
I mean, we start like the lodge right here is 85.
yeah.
Everything's up.
Yeah, like, all
It
these like, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, most elk hunting is lower than that.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Yep.
like they're killing bulls at lower elevation that whereas you're, like, between 8 and 11,000 feet.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts on that, man? Have you guys been dealing with it? I used to have some, every once in a while I'll deal with it, but, do you have to deal with it much with clients, and do you got any recommendations for people?
Like as far as altitude
Yeah,
stuff,
dealing with it
we
or
haven't had
avoiding
any
it?
emergencies lately, and I think
Right.
part of the reason is we're prepping guys beforehand, that they should be getting in shape. They should be coming out here a few days before the hunt, even hanging out in Denver at what is it down there 5,000, 6,000
Yeah.
feet. Even hanging out at that elevation for 2 days preps you to be up here. And it's one of those things. It seems like you acclimate to elevation relatively quick. I mean, I think 2 days gets you somewhat there.
Yeah, like a big
Um,
like a big chunk of the acclimation. I think
yeah,
I think
yeah,
you're I
yeah.
think you're
And
right.
then just while you're working, water, and making sure you're taking calories in.
Yeah,
Y-
yeah.
yeah, you'll hold up.
Yeah, taking care of yourself, not getting
I
it.
think there's a little bit of not placebo, but that's in everybody's head too, right? That like
Yeah.
it's their excuse for feeling like shit. They're like, "Oh, Gosh, I'm so out of breath this altitude.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. Yeah, you're just out of shape. Yeah,
yeah,
a lot of
you
the
got a
time.
spare tire around your hips too.
Yeah. No, I mean, shit. Dude, I noticed that, this actually just recently I was in Idaho guiding bear hunts, and I noticed that I'm like, dude, I'm the most out of shape that I've been. And you know
Yeah,
what it is, Evan, is exactly what you said. I've been relying on diving and, spearfishing for exercise, and I don't get that high level cardio from that. Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
that, and
yep,
I noticed that big time.
yep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the altitude thing, man, the one that I used to always notice, is guys are like, okay, hey, we're coming out, Cliff, and we're gonna drive all night from
Yeah,
Ohio,
yeah.
and they show up tired and they've been like
Yep,
swapping off. It's three guys, they've driven for 30
yep,
hours, and then they go in, and then they tend to have altitude sickness
yep,
symptoms. But dude, I don't know if that might just be that they're just tired. It's weird how people have
yep,
this expectation. They go out west and they do crazy shit and they expect to perform. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, and you need to, I mean, even in like a wilderness camp, you need to take care of yourself. Like you're working hard all day, but you need to remember to eat, remember to drink. When you have a chance to sleep, which isn't much, you better sleep and sleep soundly. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just like your basic survival type stuff is going to make you a more effective hunter.
Yeah. Dude, let's dive into that because I think it's kind of a tactical thing. How archery elk season, l- guiding from my perspective during archery elk season, particularly horseback guiding, is the hardest guiding. In tough country because you got
Yeah.
long days and sleep
Yep.
can become an issue. How do you approach it, man? Because this is
Um,
controversial. Like, dude, this can be like a hot topic, man.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, the days are ridiculous. We're waking up at like when I'm guiding out of a wilderness camp, I've got an hour of chores on the front end of every day's hunting and an hour of chores on the back end of every day's hunting if
Yep.
if we haven't killed one, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, we're doing 3 a.m. mornings, hunting all day long. Uh, you know, 10 or 11 p.m. evenings if you haven't killed one. If you have, there was a time last year we killed a bull at last light and we got back to camp. I shit you not, as everyone else was stirring and making coffee in the cook. So I mean, it happens. I tell everybody to hit prime. I mean, elk are moving at dawn and dusk, right? Everybody knows that, and you have to be effective during those time slots. You got to be
Yeah.
moving, planning, adapting. I mean, you just need to be constantly working during prime hours. But if it's noon and you haven't heard an elk all day and you haven't seen fresh sign and you don't know what the hell to do, sleep for
Yeah.
a couple hours, get under a shade tree, get somewhere cool and relax so that that evening, um, you can get back to them.
Yeah. Dude, it
Uh,
sounds it sounds so obvious, Evan, but dude,
you
guarantee
got a
you,
nap.
yeah, you have to sleep. When this goes out, dude, somebody will comment on the YouTube
Oh,
video
I
or
know.
whatever, and they'll say, "Oh, well, I kill all my bulls during
At
at 10,
midday.
yeah,
Yeah.
10:45 when they take their cows to water." And they got
Yep.
like some theory. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but
Yeah,
I'm like,
I've killed bulls at midday.
yeah.
But that's when I know where they're at and where to be and what's when I'm scratching my head, I'm
Yeah.
not just gonna freaking go searching for elk. I'm gonna sleep.
Yeah. Dude, and I
Yeah.
think, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong on this because this is like a dorky thing that I've thought a lot about and I've talked to hunters a lot about. Dude, there's this thing that people do, and I don't think they realize, Evan, how critical, and this goes beyond elk. They don't understand how critical certain periods of time are
Yep.
relative to other periods of time. Like, I find it such a weird thing. Like, let's take bear hunts because I've just been bear hunting. Then you can comment on elk because I think there's like some analogies. But dude, so you'll go out and everybody knows, like in the spring in particular, the bears are going to get killed in the last like hour and 15 minutes
Yep.
of the day, right? Like, and it's a crazy high percentage, man. Like, I bet it's like in my experience, like 90% get
Yep.
killed during that window, right?
Yep.
The problem is you got long days. So you get up, you have, kind of a slow morning. Maybe you'll go hunt for like 30, 40 minutes right at, first light. You might catch a bear. Okay. Particularly if you know where one's at. But outside of that, you get this long day. You do kind of a lazy morning, and then you're antsy. So you go out hunting at 1 o'clock, right? 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not getting dark until 8:30 p.m., depending on what latitude you're at or whatever. If you're in
Yep.
Canada, it might not be getting late till midnight or whatever. So,
Yep.
anyways, but everybody wants to get out and be effective, right? They're really worried about being effective. So you get out there and you start glassing, and then you glass all the way till nighttime when it becomes prime time or right before night. And then, hopefully you kill a bear and then you're going home in the dark. Like that's the ideal situation. What's interesting to me is that people will uniformly act the same during the whole period of time. So
Yeah.
like a guy will like I'll be like honestly, dude, between 1 and 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, like I lackadaisically glass and I eat
Yeah.
snacks and I let
Yep.
my eyes rest and I contemplate, my existential existence on this earth. Like all of this, like because I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm here to be effective, but I'm like saving it up for like the time. And then when the
Yeah.
time comes,
You
don't
you need to be a lazy
yeah, don't
home,
fucking
right?
talk to me, dude. And don't
Don't
start
touch
eating
the snack
snacks.
bag.
Yeah.
Don't scratch your knee. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a big part of like being a successful hunter is just like time management.
Yeah.
Knowing when to bear down and knowing when to ease back so that you've got gas in the tank when you need it, you know?
Yeah, 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 for sure. And then, dude, you tell me your perspective on this, man. Like from other hunters you observe, in over the counter units or whatever that you're competing with. How often do you see them go home early?
Yeah.
Now, I don't mean
Um,
like trip wise. I mean like on the day at the. I
yeah,
know you
yeah.
do both.
Yeah, often, and it's always like we've talked about this before. It's always it's an excuse. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like, uh, oh, shit. There's a freak snowstorm. We better get to lower country, and well, since we're down there, we'll go to town and get a room.
yeah, yeah,
Or like, uh, we're getting low on food, so we
yeah,
came, but
yeah,
you had enough, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. The quitting is always an excuse, in my
yeah.
opinion.
But
It's just weak people caving to weakness.
yeah, yeah, and then it's like contagious amongst group. But
Yeah, yeah,
even on the daytime, dude, like I noticed like and I think it's a function of people trying to hunt too much during the shitty hours of the day. A lot of
sure.
guys a
Yep,
lot of guys 20 minutes before dark, they're like, "Oh,
yep.
like we've really we've really pushed it. Like let's just go back to camp. There's nothing here." You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you and I don't want to like project that you do this, Evan, but do you what's your nighttime schedule when you're archery elk hunting?
Yeah, so whatever. Typical bedtime would be
No,
10,
no,
11 p.m.
I mean you're hunting. Like you're hunting. Do you glass until
Oh,
dark?
how am I hunting through the evening hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I hadn't located elk in the morning, right? If I'd located elk in the morning, we're playing off of those elk, right? But say I hadn't. If hypothetically our morning was a bust and I'm scratching my head, I'm gonna
Right.
take a nap. and then come 4 or 5 o'clock, I want to be in a spot where um, I can hear well, where I can see well, um, where I can project volume with a tube if I want to. I want to be in a big vantage point, right,
Yeah.
in an area where I expect elk to be. I'll wait until the long hours, right, until it's cool, until I absolutely know elk are on their feet. And if I hadn't heard or glassed elk at that point, I'll start to rip bugles and we'll move, right?
Okay.
Then we'll prospect. And I like to set it up in a way that you're being efficient with your time because that hour and a half matters. And I want to cover as much ground available elk country in that hour and a half that I can. So I'll run a ridge line or a rim or something where I can project off of both sides and get down country quickly. And we'll
Yep.
try to just pick that whole route apart in the evening, and hopefully get one to scream back, you know?
Yeah, I got you. So you'll and maybe this applies to both afternoon and the morning, but when you're just in the phase of trying to find elk, and
Yeah.
do you view it that way, Evan, when you start an archery elk hunt, like a personal one, or when you're guiding, you're in the phase of finding elk?
I mean, so you hit it earlier. My perspective, like for the audience, is very narrow, right? I grew up in the game unit that I hunt. All my adult life, I've hunted here.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty intimate knowledge of the place and of hunting here. And
Yeah,
so I
sure.
usually have like a plan A
Yeah,
off the
yeah.
bat. I have a plan B off the bat. If I didn't, I would start my hunt with optics on a vantage point. Because I have some background information and I know where elk ought to be in
Yeah.
September, I kind of know where to begin with a bugle tube. Um, I think it's silly just to run around on trails bugling if you haven't found elk first, or if you don't have like a
You got hot
long-term
spots.
ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I got
Um,
you.
but in my case, I know I'm starting where elk are. And
Yeah.
so I'll start with a bugle tube
I
as
got you.
opposed to
So
glass.
yeah, so you're trying to look at a pocket elk. So this is really interesting, man, and I want to get your perspective on this. So you know, like your hot spots, and I think anybody that's listening to this, you know, it might take them a couple of years, but they can develop some spots, and maybe they're going to find elk by glassing.
Yeah,
Maybe they're
and the
running.
spots change too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, sure. But you have some historical knowledge. But either way, like you kind of know where you're trying to locate elk. Man, you're hunting in some areas, Evan, that people will say a lot of people, the vast majority of people who hunt that stuff, and it could be other over the counter stuff in Colorado too. They'll say, dude, the elk do not bugle.
Yeah, yeah.
They do not bugle. I want to hear your perspective on that in relation to this, because I think there's like some things in here that could be real helpful to people.
Yeah, they absolutely bugle.
Yeah.
Um,
What's the key?
and
I mean, what the hell is wrong with these people that say they don't? What do you think it is?
I think a big thing, guys that are using they're using their bugle tube in a place that doesn't hold elk. Like
Yeah.
just the density, there are not elk behind every rock, bush, and tree.
Yeah.
There's high densities of elk in small places, right?
Right.
On an otherwise big map.
Sure.
Um, I think most guys that say, "Man, I walked 40 miles today and I bugled all day long and I didn't get a single response," it's because an elk never heard them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No,
um,
dude, I wanna dig a little deeper in that, Evan, because I've noticed this a little bit, but I wanna hear your thought on it. So if you're like in a you know your spots and you're saying like, "Okay, like I'm in the last couple hours before dark, I'm gonna start covering ground and start locate bugling." Like,
yep.
how close do you have to be to get them to respond?
Yeah. So the response thing, I think, is dependent on time of day. Like they just are not as responsive when they're bedded with cows in the middle of the day and it's 80 degrees, right?
Yeah.
When they're on their feet and moving and active is when they're going to be more likely to scream. The second thing that you nailed is proximity. If
Right.
you're if you're 2 miles away, like I don't doubt you can hear a bugle from a mile and a half with the right line of
Yeah, yeah.
sight. But it's not enough. It's not enough to trigger a response out of a bull.
Yeah.
I it's almost like when I locate bugle. Um, I've heard guys say they want to sound wimpy and vulnerable and not intimidating. You know, they want a weak, wimpy sound. I don't want a challenge sound, but I want something loud and high
Yeah.
pitched and short. You know, like just a 3 second. "Ee," uh,
Yeah.
that that that's shrill. I think it's almost like a shot gobble with a
Yeah.
turkey, right? If
I
you
was
hit
gonna
that
ask
high note
how you thought about
and
it.
you're close enough, they're gonna seize up and bugle back at you.
Yeah, you almost get like a reactive bugle from them.
Yeah, yeah. They
Yeah.
can't help it,
Yeah,
right?
but
Yeah,
but man, you keyed in on something that I think catches people, and I have the same issue, is I'll get into a big basin. It's like some of the country that you're hunting and, you know, in the elk hunting world, it's big country. Like, it's like mile
yeah,
wide drainage or whatever.
yeah,
If you go in the top of the basin and you locate bugle and you don't hear a bugle, it doesn't
yeah.
mean there's no elk in there.
they only heard you for 400 yards or whatever, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the
sure.
ones that heard you at 800 yards weren't gonna respond anyways.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So you gotta do what you're saying, like, you really, like, you
yeah,
can't write it off, you've gotta realize you've gotta be close, man, and I notice it with gunshots and stuff, like, that wind can take sound all over the place,
yeah.
you know?
And there's back to, like, when you were talking about planning an evening hunt, and the same goes for a morning hunt. I'm not picking spots, I'm picking routes when I'm using a bugle. Um,
Okay.
Mostly with, obviously I wanna be in proximity to elk, but I'm thinking about where I can bugle and project from, where sound is gonna travel to the ears of elk.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah, almost
right?
like
Like
glassing
if you're
point,
just walking through
glassing point.
flat timber, in flat timber, they're only gonna respond from like 200 yards. You know what I mean? You're gonna have to be on top of them. So I try to plan things out in a way where, like, all right, I look at my map and I'm moving down this spine. When it turns here, I'm gonna bugle off that east side. When the ridge turns this way, I'm gonna bugle to the west. And I'm gonna just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
systematically work my sound across the landscape until
Yeah,
I hit one.
yeah, and so okay, so that's interesting, and they're not necessarily spots that are like they're not necessarily like a glassing spot. They're not gonna correlate
No,
perfectly to glassing spots that are visual. They could just be like, "Hey, you're on this saddle, and you know it bowls out into this big spot that, looks
for
elky,"
sure.
and you can.
It's all about sound, man.
Yeah, yeah.
And like you said, if there's environmental stuff, if it's windy, if it's rainy, shit, it gets hard. You need those bright, clear, crisp mornings, and and you need to take into consideration stuff like if you're in the trees, you're just not going to be able to call as far or as efficiently.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. No, that's super, super interesting. Dude, and I think just to reiterate what you're talking about in terms of a lot of people saying they don't vocalize, I think a lot of it is like you say, there's just no elk where they're at. Dude,
yeah,
Colorado, one of the reasons it's tough, Evan, like in September, is like the habitat's insane. It's good
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
like people ask me, they're like, "Hey, Cliff, on Onyx, can you show me how to find elk?" I'm like, "Not really." Because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I can't take 4 variables and show you 5% of the flat tops or the San Juans that
yeah.
have those 4 variables. All of it has those 4
Yeah,
variables,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So it could
Yeah, I mean,
be.
from a hunting standpoint, it's not as good for the elk and their overall health, but, I pray for dry summers
Yeah.
because it concentrates them. They can't live in the timber, you know?
Yeah, 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 sure.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
if you're this is a question I get all the time, and this is like people enter the frustration zone, right? Like 3 days, haven't heard a bugle. They've been glassing for elk, plus they've been mixing in the strategy, that you're talking about where they think there
mhm,
might be some elk. Maybe a buddy told them they, hunted there before. They got some knowledge that, hey, this is like
yeah.
a rutting area or whatever. No bugles, right? No bugles, really no fresh sign. Like what would you tell a guy?
I'm gonna back way out. I'm gonna go to a knob where I can see 10 miles in every direction, and I'm gonna glass mornings and evenings until I see elk. And
Okay.
then I'm gonna get back in there, right, and try with the bugle tube.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's always my, like, and that applies to rifle hunts too. If I'm not in them right off the bat on the hunt, you need to back out of there and get big vantage points and just look,
Yeah. Yep.
rather than wearing your legs and lungs out, searching on foot.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so obvious, right, Evan? Like, when you say it
Yeah,
out loud,
yeah.
it's like, that's obvious. But you ever thought about why people don't do that? It's almost like I always wonder. Go
I
ahead.
think people correlate, and they correlate effort with results.
Yeah.
Guys will say, "I walked 50 miles today and I didn't see an elk." And I'm thinking, like, well, yeah, it's because you walked 50 miles. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. I think people sometimes correlate, like the harder that I'm trying, the more results I'm gonna. And it's not necessarily true. You're maybe better off um, doing this pause push thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah. Dude, the I totally agree with that, Evan. I feel like the other thing people do is they think about it. they think like, man, I'm already set up here. I just need to find some elk where I'm at. Because
Sure.
if I go up to that big glassing
You have
point,
to break camp.
yeah, I gotta do all that. But then also, if I glass up elk, you know, 2.5 miles away, down a drainage, up a drainage, I gotta go over there. And then I gotta
Yeah.
decide in my mind, like, can I do that? Dude, and give me your thoughts on it, and then I'm gonna give mine. Like, that whole concept.
Like,
Like what okay. Yeah, that's not fair. Let me tell you
yeah,
what I think.
I think it's a quit, like we were just talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Like, if that's where the elk are, it's what you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
It
you know what I mean? Like,
and
it's not
I don't think people understand that, Evan. Like, I don't
yeah,
think people understand that, like, most of this type of elk hunting is like, "Oh, look, there's elk 2.5 miles over there." It's not a debate of like, "Oh, well, we can't get over there anyways." It's like, "No, no, no, dude, that's how this type of hunting is."
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's like
it's
that's
like
our only option. That's elk.
yeah.
That's yeah.
Dude, but
Yeah,
people like, I believe me, dude, like, I can relate to just being like, "Oh,
yeah,
holy shit, like, that's gonna be
yeah,
tough, man." Like, we're gonna get over there and they're not gonna have moved or, whatever, you know?
yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting part of it. But we'll I wanna talk to you I wanna stay on the calling subject and stuff a little bit more, and then I'll get into maybe we'll talk more about that stuff in rifle. But so you located a bull, Evan. Like, what's your go-to strategy? And you know, um, be as detailed as you want. I know not every situation's the
Yeah,
same,
yeah.
but
I
what's your
I
thoughts?
mean, I'll give you like we could run through like a hypothetical
Yeah,
type thing,
go
right?
for it.
If so, I've started my morning on a big ridge line. I know there's elk in the basin below me. Okay. I'm there, and in fact, I'll leave camp several hours before dawn, not just to arrive there in the dark, but to arrive there like with an hour of dark. I want to sit and listen, and believe it or not, elk will bugle in that hour or two before daylight, like
Sure.
before the sky even goes green. I think that's when they start to move a little bit and kind of leave their feeding area. So just I get somewhere big. I listen through an hour of darkness. Okay, when it cracks dawn and it's legal shooting light, I'm gonna bugle. I don't get a response, so we're gonna book it down the ridge, right? Efficiently, hitting things as we
Yep.
go. When I get one to snap back, the first thing I do this turkey hunting too. If I'm with a partner, I ask that everybody points the direction, and you always get this
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's helpful because it helps you. Sound is strange how it moves across the landscape, and if you have two guys, getting 2 points will help you kind of find center. Um, you need dead quiet when you're doing this, right? Like the snack bag thing is my biggest. I'll freaking throw my hat. If somebody's chewing on a snack while we're listening for a bugle, you need
Yeah.
dead silence because you need to get that precise location. You need a bearing, right? Um, when we have a bearing, my next step is not to go back and forth with that bull. That's what everybody wants to do. It's
Yeah.
exciting to hear one, and it's exciting to get them to interact. But you need to know that when locating, really all you want is to figure out where he is. Okay. Um, so we've got a bearing. My next step, and it happens fast. It's not like we're not going to sit and look at the map and plan. We're just going to try to quickly cut that distance in half, no matter what the distance is. So if he bugled from a mile away, we're going to a half mile. If he bugled from 500 yards away, we're taking it to 250. I want to cut that distance in half. The second bugle that I'll give him is to chart out his direction of travel, which is just as relevant as his location. When they're on, you know this, man. Anybody that's hunted elk does. You cannot walk and keep up with a walking elk. Like even
Yeah.
just a naturally feeding elk that's real relaxed and not going anywhere
Sure.
fast, we
Yep.
can't keep up with them in the
Yeah.
mountains, man. So it's vital that you understand the direction of travel so that you can intercept instead of end up in this game Everybody's got a story like this. Like we chased him over one ridge and then the next and then the next. And oftentimes guys will say it's he herded up his cows and left.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think that's what happened. I think you just ended up behind him and you couldn't keep
yeah.
up with them as they headed where they were going.
Right.
So you got to understand those angles. You get his location, his direction of travel on that second bugle, right? And again, we're both going to point. Okay, we've got him. So now we're down to like a manageable distance. Say we're 400 or 500 yards from him, right? We know what direction he's headed. We have a very good idea of where he is now. We're gonna step it even closer, and this is where it gets scary, and where I think a lot of guys, um, again, on making excuses, a lot of guys will get too cautious
Hmm.
and they won't be able to push this final threshold. They're like, "Holy shit, we're 300 yards from a bull,"
Yeah.
and they're stricken with just analysis paralysis.
Yeah, they don't they're so worried about fucking it up.
You're not there yet,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
You just got inside a rifle range.
Right.
You need to get a lot closer.
Yeah.
But it's at this point, so at like long rifle range, like say 400 yards, is where I'm going to start. Like up to that point, it's been all about punctuality. It's been
Yep.
about getting down the mountain, closing the distance. I don't care what we sound like. I'm really not even that conscious of the wind. But when we get down to 500 yards or so, I must have the wind, and we're going to slow down and think about what we're doing and be very observant as we press closer, right? If he's got cows that are outside, you know what I mean. We don't
Sure.
we don't want to ruin it at this point.
Right.
Um, that that third kind of calling session is when I really ramp it up. So I'm at 300 yards. We go from running down the mountain to tiptoeing down the mountain and watching as we go. Probably got an arrow knocked, right? Um, and we're going to go to the spot that we've charted him, right? The spot that we know he's headed to
Yeah.
from his direction of travel. When we get to that spot, and we're like smelling elk and we're hearing rocks roll, not until then do I like set up. Does that
Right.
make sense? I think a lot of guys, I mean, you hear that term set up used a lot in calling elk. It's just a second, man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just a couple minutes right before you kill the damn thing. It's mostly mobile and fluid and dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, and not until like we are in the midst of them do we sit down and pick shooting lanes and start to call that bull in.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
And
so
and at that point, I think I'm sub 200 yards from that bull, right?
yeah.
And
Be
I haven't called constantly to him. I've only called twice if we did it right,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, so
And then I'm gonna go nuts. Then I'm gonna scream and chuckle and
oh, okay.
have a ton of fun with my calls.
Once you're set up.
Um, once we're set up and
Yep.
we're inside of 200.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I wanna I'll I get tons of questions about setups, and it's interesting because, like you say, like, do even at this point in my guiding experience, Evan, setups can be very tricky in the sense that there's like the period of time that you're talking about where you get in close and you can run into satellite bulls, you can run into cows. You're trying to be very cautious at that moment if you're in like a swirl of elk. But anybody who's experienced at it knows that the closer they get before they kind of do that setup, the higher likelihood they're going to kill the bull.
Yep.
The one challenge with that is it's like a trade-off, right? It's like I want to get closer, but I'm going to have less time to think about like that setup. Like a lot of
Mhm.
times for me, dude, the setup is like, dude, make it to that tree right there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
do it
Yeah.
right now. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Cuz like,
Yep.
so well, I want to talk about I want to hear your perspective and like maybe your little checklist of things on the setup. But before we move to that, like, I love your explanation, dude, of like how you set up. I totally agree with like your calling sequence, but I think we've missed just a chunk of the why that I think
Okay.
I want the listeners and viewers to understand. So starting with this dynamic of you want silence and then you want to know exactly where the bull is.
Mhm.
The reason you do that is because I mean, dude, you're talking about maybe covering a mile or 3/4 of a
Mhm.
mile at a fast pace, and you've called like 2 or 3 times.
Mhm.
Dude, maybe the people listening to this who haven't done this much, they may think like, "Oh yeah, that seems reasonable." Dude, when you're in it, if you don't get a good location, you don't get the direction to travel, every split second, I'm like, "God, I wanna bugle. I wanna bugle so bad because I wanna know where he went. I wanna know
Uh-huh.
where he's at." Like, to this
Uh-huh.
day, Evan, like, I'm like, "Dude," and I make
Yeah.
excuses. I'll be guiding somebody, I'll be like, I think they may have moved. I think they may have moved, like, but maybe we scared them. Maybe I gotta get 'em," and it's like I wanna bugle constantly, and I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
very normal for people, but comment on why you don't.
Uh, you just can overdo it. In the past, I've found that when I've gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with a bull from a long distance, he's not coming to me, right? I know
Yeah.
that. He's just announcing himself and I'm announcing myself. Now he's aware of me. He's looking for me. But I've
Yeah, you just
turned
know
him on to
yeah,
the
you I
gig,
got you.
right? Um,
Yep.
I want to surprise him. You know what I mean? I'm using a locate bugle just to know his location. But as far as the calling interaction goes, I want it to be a shock to him that
Yeah, okay.
holy shit, there's a bull 200 yards away from me, and I've got some cows over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I get it.
and I think you ruin that. You ruin that if you're calling all the way to him.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
ruin that element of um, being obnoxious,
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
shock
no.
and
No,
surprise.
I totally get that, and it's interesting to me, Evan, because me and you come to the same conclusion. I think we have a different like, my explanation, and I have no idea if this is freaking true or not. My explanation has always been, like, those freaking bulls and the cows around them, like, they know exactly where you're at when you bugle.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? It's almost like that first bugle, you get them to fire off. They could have been down, like, grazing, and they were just like, "What the hell is that?" You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
they'll bugle. But the more you give them, you're giving them like, you're showing them your cards a little bit. And so that's why I view it that's why I always thought about, like, oh, like, that's why my probability of killing them goes down based on my history in these situations. But I think your explanation is just as valid. It's like
Yeah.
you've just kinda, like, worn them out. They know you're coming.
Yeah.
Maybe they've thought about, like, "Man, that bugle sounds a little weird." You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
who knows?
Like, it's not normal for me to bugle 12 times in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. It just it feels artificial to me, and I think it feels artificial to elk because I've had it. I mean, all this shit that I'm telling you is stuff that I've learned through experience.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I've ruined a lot of call-ins by calling my way to the bull, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and everybody listen to this, dude. If they're not doing this a whole lot, they're gonna be in the middle of this, and they're gonna be like, "I don't give a shit what Evan and Cliff have to say. I'm bugling because I wanna
Yeah.
hear them bugle." You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. But, dude, you nailed some stuff that's, like, key. Like, that whole
And
deal.
when you've got that proximity, so like I said, I mean, you got cows moving around you in the trees. You can hear him grunting and breathing.
Yeah.
Gosh dang! At that time, you can bugle as much as you want. You cannot ruin it at that point by
Yeah.
making elk sounds. Any sound you want. I don't care if you want to cow call. If you want to chuckle, chuckle. If you want to, it doesn't matter. If you have that proximity and you're making elky sounds,
Yeah.
he's gonna check you out.
Yeah, you're in that sphere of where the bull just can't tolerate it.
Right,
He's
right.
gotta come check you out. So, yeah, dude,
Yeah.
so it's you're gonna set like, you've gotten into that, you're, like, in the thick of it, you're between 50 and 150 yards from him or something like that. Is that kinda what's your goal?
Yeah, yeah,
What's
yeah,
your goal?
yeah,
If
roughly that, like, as
Yeah.
far as you can see in light timber. What is
Yeah, yeah,
that?
I
That's
gotcha.
100, 150 yards, yeah.
Yeah, so what's your mental checklist at that point for setting up?
Looking for a lane and wind, right, obviously, and we've been thinking about at this point, sub 500, we've been thinking about wind the whole time.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, sometimes you'll make a big move. The bull might have bugled from downhill and the wind's ripping at your back the whole way. When you get to that 500 point, you're going to swing way around and come back around, right? Um, but Yeah, no, so I'm thinking about wind and I'm thinking about shooting lanes, and you called it. It's not like, it's not like, "All right, we're gonna break some branches, and then we're gonna,
Yeah,
it's just like you need to, and I prep hunters for this. In that moment, you need to see for yourself. You need to just say, I can shoot right there. Um, it's particularly handy with a hunting with a partner, right? Because you can set the archer on his lane and then decide where you need to call from to drag that bull across that lane.
yeah,
Um, I hunted alone. You remember, I hunted alone for a lot of years and was effective.
sure.
But what I had to do on call-ins when I was hunting solo is different from what I do when I guide. When I guide, I'm trying to call a bull across that lane. When I was hunting alone, I would call until I knew he was headed to me, and then I would advance a little bit. I'd advance
Yeah.
40 yards silently and wait for him there. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
and you'd wait. You wouldn't call again unless
I'd
you
wait
needed
silently.
to.
I'd
Yeah.
make a bunch of noise and then I'd creep forward 40 and wait there.
Yeah. Within
Um,
that, that brings a question to my mind, Evan. When a bull hangs up there, like right at, 60, 70 yards, you know how they do, like where you
yeah.
can't see them, right? So 80 yards maybe or whatever. And they're just bugling like crazy. You can hear cows, chirping around in there and everything else. What do you do? What do you do in that moment?
You gotta get closer and yeah, closer quietly.
Yeah, you ever
Um,
try do you ever try to kill them without just try to stalk them?
from time to time. I mean, yeah, no, from time to time. If I'm already almost there, if all I have to do is walk another 15 yards and wait,
Yeah,
I'll do that, right?
yeah,
But I'm mostly using the calling to pinpoint a bull that's responsive to calls and to get close to him. From
yeah,
there, it's just like it's yours. Once you're 150 yards from elk, like you could probably stand still there and
might
just
float by
by
you.
odds, an elk's going to walk by you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, for me, the bugling and the calling is more about just getting in there on them in an area that where low density elk.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And most of the elk you kill personally or you kill with clients, are they coming in? Are they coming into your calling or are you basically spot and stalking them the last 50, 60 yards? Like, do you have a breakdown of what that is?
I mean, so like last year's guided archery, both of those bulls were called in and bugling
Into a
aggressively,
setup. Yep.
all the way up to the shot.
Yep. Yep. So that's
Yeah,
pretty darn common for you.
yeah,
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 and the reason I ask is because a lot of guys that I talk to that do a lot of, the same type of hunting, it's kinda mixed.
yeah,
Some of them they most do a similar strategy to you, but then there's a section of guys that don't really call. They
yeah.
spot and like glass, spot and stalk them, shoot them with their bow. And then most people have a very similar strategy on the calling front as you, but some of them just once they get in there close, they basically, try to just close the distance and shoot them. Um, I
Once
do it.
you have that 150 to 100 yards proximity, it doesn't matter
Who
what,
cares?
like,
Yeah, yeah,
you've got them at that point, right?
yeah. Yep, yep.
You've got them. If you wanna go quiet and slip up there, do it. If you like the experience of him bugling close,
Yeah.
bugle. Yeah, at that point, you've got it
Have
dialed.
you ever I've tried this a couple times with mixed results, Evan, but have you ever tried to make a lot of racket? Bugle, cow calls, calf calls, all at the same I've done this a couple times on bulls that I cannot get to move. Like
Really?
they're yeah, like so no, like they're out there like, you know, 80 yards from me. I can't see them, but I can hear them and the cows moving all over the place.
Yeah,
And so I start making a racket. And I'm not saying that they don't do what you're talking about. Like I could have boogered it up at this point. And for some reason, they're like hanging it up there. Maybe I've called too much, whatever. But I've had times where I'm like, man, this has been going on for an hour or 35 minutes or whatever. And
yeah,
I'm just afraid these elk are going to just start walking off.
yeah,
And then we're gonna be in like the chasing game. So I've
yeah,
had hunter I've it just makes logical sense to me. Like I'm gonna make some racket, keep the bull interested. He's still bugling, he's still
Yeah,
reacting to
and then
me.
advance a
And
little
then
bit.
and then
Yeah,
have the hunter stalk him while I'm
yeah,
making that racket. Do you ever do
yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, but I mean, when I
Yeah,
was talking about my solo hunting, that was my
that's what you're
solo
doing.
hunting
Yeah, yeah.
strategy,
Yep.
um, and was real effective, so yeah.
Yeah, I've had mixed results on it. I think part of it is those freaking cows. Like
Yeah, they're so
once
alert.
they hear you making racket and stuff, they're really in tune on
Yeah.
anything that comes from that
I
direction.
This will probably stir some opinions, but,
Sure.
I prefer bowl sounds for that reason. I feel like there's less interest from the cows to bowl
Oh,
sound,
okay. Yeah.
right?
Like they just
And so there's
ignore it.
maybe a little less scrutiny, right? Like if you sound shitty on a cow call, a cow knows. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? If you sound shitty on a bugle, the bull doesn't care. He's so rut drunk, he doesn't care,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yep.
That's kinda why I primarily make bull sounds,
Yeah, even yeah, up close in there. That's
even
interesting,
up
man.
close, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a super interesting perspective, Evan, because like the dude, I question anything, like anything that's like a common, thing that you hear. I'm always like open to questioning it. But
Yeah.
one that you're talking about is like most people view cow sounds as less risk than bugle sounds.
I think it's the other
You
way.
think it's the
I think
opposite?
there's
Yeah,
a
that's
lot more scrutiny.
yeah. I
I
that's
mean, those
interesting.
cows there's 14-year-old cow elk, you know?
Yeah, yeah. They know.
Um,
Well, and plus, dude, I think they know. I think they know each other.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know what I
totally, and
mean?
they
Like,
they know how many calves there are in their little herd, and yeah, they're so much more careful.
yeah,
And they don't have all that, to whatever, a few of them, but they don't have that hormonal, just, rage that a bull has,
yeah.
where they have blinders on. They're still thinking survival.
Yeah, and
Um,
don't you notice you get a sense of, like, when you start cow calling now, so I got 2 things I've experienced quite often is, like, if I can it sometimes I'll get, like, a calf to react to
yeah,
me, and it's
yeah.
almost like they're a wean I think they're my thought on this, and I was talking to a guy that seemed to, have some knowledge on, like, just the biology elk. What I've heard is that those cows will wean the bull calves earlier than the female calves.
Oh,
So, and there's a that I guess there's some theory that it's like an evolved trait because what happens is because the bull calves are weaned a little earlier, they actually have less survivability than the female calves, and that kind of keeps the ratio of the elk
yeah.
correct or whatever. And whatever. I don't know if any of it's true,
That's
but
cool. Yeah, that's cool knowledge.
it makes sense. But anyways, like
Yeah,
how you get these calves, they're like they're spastic.
yeah.
You like you start calf calling them
Man,
to 'em.
man,
Yeah, yeah,
man,
and
man.
they'll
I've
run
had
up to
it. Yeah,
they'll
we've
run
all
up
had
to
it.
you and they pop up,
Yep,
and sometimes
yep,
bulls will hear it going on and they'll come running right up back behind,
yep.
right behind a cow or right behind the calf, like whatever. Those are some of the experience where I've had bulls get almost like scaredly, like, or excuse me, like it scares me they get so close. They come so fast or whatever, these
Yeah,
calves that are like highly reactive. But what's
yeah.
interesting is the calf is not trying to have a conversation. The calf is like scared shitless and like wants a buddy. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
But dude,
yeah,
when you get into those exchanges with cows, it's almost like you can feel their vibe and you're like, "Oh,
yeah,
she's trying to have a conversation with me, but I don't know
yeah.
how to have the
I
conversation."
mean, it's amazing. There's a whole sect of guys that many of them that have studied the vocabulary of elk, and there's a whole range of cow sounds. And if you're hitting a note wrong, you're spitting a different word in the vocabulary than what they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, a bull bugle, is just raw hormonal rage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think there's a vocabulary there.
Yeah, yeah, sure. No, I could totally see that. It'll probably
Uh,
change my perspective on it a little bit. And the thing is, Evan, is like I totally know what you're talking about for man. Like if you watch cows through like where you can see them through like under the
yeah,
understory of Ponderosa, man, if you bugle, sometimes they know it's there, it's a noise. But man, the
you
minute you
cow
cow
call and they
call,
snap
boom,
their
yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They're like,
yep,
who's that?
yep.
And you
Yeah.
for sure, I mean, I think it's cool because you do realize like real quick, like, oh, there's like a head honcho cow in,
Yep.
at least for the moment or whatever,
Yep.
that's gonna take you up on the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Super interesting, man. Within that, Evan, shot placement, man. What's your thoughts on shot placement? Let's go over the controversial frontal and then everything else. What would you have a
Man,
thought
I
on that?
had a guy kill a bull last year on a frontal at like 40 yards. It was funny because the bull was we were having a bugling exchange and he had kind of hung up, and then all of a sudden he appeared at 40 at the edge of some aspens and he started raking an aspen right there. And as a guide, I'm supposed to be Johnny on the spot with ranges, right? I don't
Sure.
like to tell a guy when to draw and when to shoot. I want him to see that for himself, but
Right.
I don't want him to miss because he doesn't have the range. So as soon as that bull came out and started raking, I hit him and I said 40. And before I could even look to see, whop,
Oh, he
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 let one
construed
go.
he construed it as like, shoot. Yeah.
I mean, it drilled him. Hit him right where it should in the dark fur kind of center elevation. And that bull died really quickly. I mean, he died in 200 yards.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I don't. I'm all good with it as long as you
Yeah.
can make that shot and
Sure.
your own capabilities, right? The target's only what do you think, 8 or 10 inches at most, right there.
The full frontal? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
like probably that big.
Yeah.
Um,
If you know you can make that shot every time, yep, it's deadly. Um,
yeah.
you need to avoid elevation is really important on that, and it's really hard to piece together because of the profile, right? Like, you need to be able to envision where his thoracic cavity is, not be putting it high in the neck, and not putting it low in the brisket.
Yeah, not just
Um,
slicing his brisket open.
but yeah, no, all good with that. Ideal, right, is broadside or quartering away.
Yeah.
And I tell guys to look. My shot placement's maybe a little further back than
Yeah.
what's typically recommended. I say look for the crease, which is that dark triangle of hair that's just behind the point of the leg, and then walk a third of the way to halfway up the body from the
Yeah.
crease. Um, I know, everybody talks what they call it, the vital V or whatever. That's
Yeah,
kind
you
of
mean
more on the shoulder there.
like with the shoulder bone?
Yeah, the margin of error is just smaller there. Like I
Yeah.
don't doubt that it's absolutely deadly, but if you miss by 6 inches, you're in a big bone.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's tough to yeah. It just if you hear that thump and 2/3 of their 3/4 of the arrows hanging out, like,
yeah,
sucks.
I mean, I love that, and I'm not super techie, that Cliff. I love that guys get into their archery
Broadhead.
setups
Yeah.
and the most effective arrow and broadhead combination. I love that. But I don't care what you're shooting. You shouldn't expect for it to break the the shoulder blade of an elk.
Yeah.
That's a big bone, and I've lost bulls that way. I'm sure you have. I've seen it guiding. It doesn't kill them. It doesn't kill them.
No, yeah. I mean, the crazy thing about archery, Evan, is I've lost bulls that I thought were shot perfectly. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And
yeah.
so it's an enigma that way, and I shouldn't say that's just archery. I mean, it's rifle stuff too, but,
It also can be incredibly lethal too, like
oh, yeah.
compared to rifle. I mean, like a well-placed arrow that cuts hard. Um, it, like I would be really surprised to blood track a mortally wounded bull more than 200 yards.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I
sure.
mean?
Yep, yep.
And I tell that guy when we're on long tracks, it's like if we're 400 or 500 yards of tracking in, man,
Yeah.
it's not looking good because usually an arrow does it quick.
Yeah, like, yeah, lung shot bulls are
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, totally. Um, I totally agree with that. Now, what do you have any thoughts on, like, the mechanical, on certain types of broadheads, arrow setups? Do you have any thoughts on it, Evan?
Yeah, I think mechanicals are trash, and I know there's I'll probably catch flack for that too,
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yeah, no, they're garbage. I'm sure they're great on whitetail. An elk is too big bone, too heavy hided. You need penetration, I think, and there's also just so in a backcountry setting, there's so much that can go wrong with a mechanical. Your
Yeah,
O ring slips or whatever, or whatever. You're on a stalk um, with it knocked, and you brush it on grass, and it opens up.
yeah, sure,
Too many moving parts. I think a fixed blade penetrates better, and it's going to work every time.
right.
It's going to work every time.
Yeah, no,
And I don't have I don't have a brand I shoot cheap four blade fixed head broadheads, and
yeah,
they work.
and they're sharp and they work. Yeah,
Yep.
no, I get it. And I've shot both I was thinking about it. I don't think I've actually I think I've killed one cow elk with a mechanical, and I've killed a bunch of deer and pigs with mechanicals. And I'm pretty honest about it with guys. I don't have a strong opinion because I just don't
Yeah,
feel
me.
like
Yeah, yeah.
it's hard for me. And you mentioned it. So I'm totally with you, dude. Like, I think, guys that tune their arrows, or obviously you should tune your arrows, but,
Yeah,
being really intense about it,
yeah,
going through the nitty gritty of it, all of this, I think is great. I think, like, seeking perfection is a novel
yeah,
thing in archery or anything else. Now, having said that, um, I think that there's a lot of people in the archery world that draw conclusions about things that don't have really significant enough exposure to it to really have an opinion. Like,
yeah,
even in the fixed broadhead world, there's guys that are like, I'll only shoot a single bevel one. I'll only shoot one with bleeders. I won't shoot it with
yeah. But it's
bleeders.
just stuff they've read or analytics or
Yeah.
whatever. It's not like in the field
Yeah, and
experience.
it's hard, dude, because,
Yeah,
like, it's even a guy will be like, "Well, I've guided 35 successful archery elk hunts, or we've killed 100 elk on this ranch with broadheads. Like, I know what I'm talking about." It's like, well,
yeah,
honestly, you still don't, dude, because, like, you're shooting at bulls from different distances, from different angles,
yeah,
different poundage bows. There's like a thousand different variables. So I'm worthless in this discussion because all I do is leave people with more confusion. But
yeah.
it's hard for me to take much of it real serious. You know what I
I
mean?
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I took a pretty hard stance there when I said,
Oh no, I mean it's fine
mechanicals
to
are
have a
garbage."
stance.
But a again, just my experience in the woods shows me that the simpler tool is always the better tool, with anything
Yeah, that's a
gear
rash.
related,
I mean that's a
you know?
rational. Yeah, that makes sense, Evan.
Um,
And dude, I know.
and they absolutely do penetrate better. Like, that's science. There's physics behind that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. You mean fixed broadheads?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, so those things make sense, man. Like, they penetrate better, that's, factual. They're more apt to just, like, things going wrong. The same thing happens with I actually, like, I just went through this whole battle in my mind about in the spearfishing world, Evan, there's like two different types of guns. There's like a newer type of gun that's a roller, not to get like deep into it, but it's got a mechanical component of it, right? That makes it a little more complicated. And I'm like, and it's kind of like the hot new thing to have a roller spear gun, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, man, the problem is I'm going to take this gun to Panama, or I'm going to take it to Costa Rica, and I'm going to be out on a boat, 3 hours out in the ocean, and that fucking thing's going to break. And then I
yeah,
got, like, even if it's technically like better or whatever, I still have to deal with like that additional mechanical thing. And I think you have a unique like position on that because you're in remote areas where it's like it's a
yeah,
issue. We're not just going back to the lodge where we can just do
yeah.
whatever. But no, I it's
Man,
go
how
ahead.
many for all of human history? I guarantee if you were to look back through time, more elk have died by stone points than any of today's broadheads, right?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. They
um,
all.
you just need to make a hole in the lung.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, totally agree. And I'm not like viewers or listeners who are like really into this. I'm not discounting the
Me
whole thing. I
either.
mean,
Yeah,
it makes sense, but it's just kind of an interesting. I think it's just an interesting thing that people get so stuck on their opinion about it. Um,
Yeah, don't go hunting.
yeah, exactly. But good deal, dude. So I think we kind of covered the. What do you do after the shot, Evan? On archery elk.
Yeah, that same silence that I want after the bugle, I want after the shot. I want laser beam focus on, that mental image of what happened. I want that to be like a video that I can play back, right? So I want to be intensely focused on just capturing that scene. Um, and then dead silence so that we can listen to the direction of travel and distance that we hear him go, to get us started on a blood trail. I always pause. So after the shot, the first thing I'll ask a guy is like, how confident were you in that? Where do you think it hit him? Right. That's obvious. But then the next thing I'll do is that same thing I was talking about with bugling, where I want two opinions. I'll ask him, like, where do you think that bull was standing when you shot? Right. Like, what bush? And I'll interject my opinion as well, so that we can
Sure.
we can just hyper focus on that exact place he was standing when the shot was fired. Um, and and then once we've got all that together, sometimes I'll take a picture with my camera too, of where he was standing and where I think he hit the tree line, that kind of
Sure.
stuff. And then we'll go get on blood. I give it, if it's like, if we saw him coughing and bleeding and heading into the woods
Yeah.
about to
Dying.
die,
Yeah.
it's one thing. But if we're not real confident about the shot, yeah, give it time. I don't like, it's real hip in today's hunting culture. I don't like the overnight thing.
Yeah.
That's too long. I've done it, and meat spoils when you do it.
Yeah, dude.
Um,
So let's dive into that, Evan, because dude,
yep.
I don't know how many times I remember you being out when you were guiding for me. It's pretty normal. You and other guides too, and well, so you in particular will stay out all night. You'll start a fire and do it. I'll be honest with you, dude. Like
Yeah,
right when
yeah,
I was started to say that, I realized, you know what? Like I tend to, actually, if it's really late, I'll tend to come back to camp.
yeah,
Now, I don't leave, like, I'll go, like, gut a bull or something like that and get it spread, and I'll come back to camp sometimes. So, I don't think that's ideal. I think it's actually me being kind of a little bit of a bitch sometimes. And so, but you were always one to stay out late and get it done. So what are your
yeah.
thoughts on that? And also, like, what's your tactical approach to that? Either if you're by yourself or or if you're with a client or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, blood tracking's a whole, I mean, it's a whole topic unto itself. We could do 2 hours on tracking.
Right.
But for one, getting that mental map of the shot is very important. Finding first blood and marking it is very important. Um, and then yeah, again, playing out the shot. If it was a good shot, we're just going to walk the blood trail together until we stumble on him, right?
Right.
um, if it was a poor shot that requires some time, we'll wait around and then we'll start to it. um, yeah, I think, like I said, I've left bowls overnight that I was unsure about the shot or whatever. Or like, in fact, last year I left one because there was a private land boundary, right? And I didn't
Oh,
want to
okay.
I didn't want to push him onto private land.
Sure.
And I was disappointed when I found the meat. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
obviously, a good bit of it, 80% was great,
Yeah.
but there was some spoilage, and that always makes me feel like we're disrespecting the resource.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so, yeah, no, in tracking, I'm one of those. I think there's two types of guys. There's like the micro guy that likes to get down and sift through the dirt and really look on a small scale. And then
Yeah.
there's a guy that's got his head up thinking like, okay, if I was an elk,
Where'd the
I'd go
elk go?
through there.
Mhm.
Right. I'm more of that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And it can be really helpful for me to have somebody who's more of a detail oriented person, uh, to work together as a tracking team.
Sure.
Um, I mean, that's the most effective way to get things accomplished is one guy advances you and then the other guy finds it when you're lost, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but dude,
but
I like what you're talking about though is an interesting one, man, because there's several animals that I have found like after a day of tracking hard that I found them because I literally took a step back and just looked at the basin and been like,
yeah,
where would I have gone?
yep, yep.
And a lot of times you end up finding the animal, and in your mind you're like, this is an impossibility. Where
It
I
feels
found,
like magic.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also like, according to, the hunter and my story of how this went down, where we found this animal is a almost an impossibility,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
it's really weird how we can manifest this story that where we think the animal went, like it had to have gone that way. But sometimes when you take a step back, you get a different picture of like, hey, I'm an animal. I just got shot here. Like, where would I go? And it's like, it's almost like, it's like, oh, well, it kind of makes sense that I would go down there. And then you go down there, and then the
I
deer's,
mean, it's I think it's a part of our humanity, a part of who we are.
right.
If you look, here at the lodge, I'm sure you're very familiar with it. There's a game trail under the cliffs back here,
Yeah.
and I've got a camera on it. There's deer, there's lions, there's bears, there's skunks, there's chipmunks that are all taking the same path, right? Like
Yeah.
we tend to move across the landscape similarly.
Yeah. 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 Dude,
And so your instinct is usually right, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Man, I think I know the trail you're talking about. And that
Yeah.
crack in it, there's a
Yep.
crack in it up there. I'm sure I told you this story years, dude. This was like, I don't know, probably before we even met. I came down that crack one time, and that's the closest I'd ever been to a lion. Like, I came down that crack, and she had come around me, and she was right at, like, literally like 3 feet from me, laying against the
That's
rock
cool.
right there.
That's cool.
But
What'd she do? Scared her. She bolted.
oh yeah, yeah, she like spun out of there real quick. But yeah, dude, on the tracking thing, it's very interesting. Now, but on the nighttime thing, you know, Evan, do you ever have pushback from clients, or do you feel like a need to get back to camp at all? And how do you deal with that?
I would say half the time I get pushback from
Yeah.
clients, you know? Again, it's another one of those in talking about how one of the fulfilling things about guiding is pushing people to the very brink of their capabilities and mental thresholds. Um, Most people's fear of the dark is irrational,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
like
dude, do you
of
think
being
that?
out late is like nothing has changed except
Yeah.
our vision slightly. Um,
Do you think it's fear of the dark, Evan, or do you think it's fear of not being like back at camp and what? Or do you think it's just they're afraid of the dark?
Yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah,
Oh,
fear of being back at camp. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
think it's like they think the boogeyman's out there. It's
yeah.
just they're uncomfortable being deep in the back country
Yeah,
in dark.
it's like a unique idea. And
Yeah.
the reason I
Which
like the reason I
again, back to human history, we lived
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we've lived most of our existence under starlit skies.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a scary thing
Dude,
or a uncomfortable thing.
and the reason I keep like teasing into this one, Evan, and stopping you is because, dude, I like would admit to everybody, this is one that I still think about, dude. And a lot of times when I'm like working on an elk at night, I'm like, okay, why am I just thinking like, okay, I'm gonna gut this bull, get the trachea out, pop the hips open, like it'll be okay. We'll go back to camp and we'll come back. And I'm like, why am I thinking about that? Like, what would Evan do in this moment? And what he would do is he would start a fire, and he
Yeah.
would just like be a man and stay out here for the night and just get it
Uh,
over with.
your
Um,
effort too. If you deal with it that
oh
night,
yeah, just from a
for one, you're
practical,
getting like a better meat product, but then
yeah,
the
yeah,
work is done.
it's way
Then
easier.
tomorrow,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
sleep. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, it's just interesting, dude. Because I think about all the pictures when you were guiding for me that you sent to me of
Most
like
of
the
them have a
fires.
halo of light around
Yeah, yeah,
them.
like you got a fire going, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just interesting. I just feel like it might be helpful to some people to realize that, dude, even I, for whatever reason, psychologically have battled that. And I think the way that you just mentioned, I'm like, dude,
You
what?
should totally prepare for it. Jimmy and I, in like a bunkhouse conversation, we're talking about the ratio of elk killed in the PM versus the AM. And dude, when I went through my 30 or so bulls that I've guided around here, it's like 80%
Yeah.
die in the evening.
Yep.
And it's not that elk are moving more. It's because you've built that intelligence through the morning
Yeah.
to place yourself on elk in the PM, right?
Yep.
But yeah, you better be prepared to kill them at last light. Because if you were to go by my odds, that's statistically when it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, so I think this brings like and I don't want to keep you on for like 2 hours, Evan, so we'll have to do another one too. But dude, this is like a really good point for people. It circles back to the topic we were talking about before. The more comfortable you get with the idea of like, I'm going to stay out and deal with this elk, I think personally it correlates to hunting more effectively the last half hour because you're not
Yeah.
worried about it. You're like,
Yep.
dude, like, yeah, we're 3 hours from camp, we're 4 hours from camp, and that happens. Like, you get way the hell away from camp, and
Yep.
because you've been, you saw elk in the distance, you got there, you had to make it happen. Then you kill one right at dark. If you're open to that idea of working on the elk till 3 in the morning, you're more likely to stick through
Mm.
that plan and also kill one at night. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
the elk hunting in general, man, a good way to sum it up. The comfort, your love of comfort you need to abandon that. You need
yeah,
to love the process of elk hunting, and forget about the rest.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Evan, do you got like 5 more minutes, man? Five,
Yeah.
10 more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that guides like yourself and you're now really outfitting too, and seeing so many clients, so you see your guided clients that you guide personally, you see other guides that are working for you guiding people, you see all your drop camp clientele. Can you think of any characteristics of the clients that do well in all those scenarios, like any characteristics of them?
100%, man. I mean, I could write a biography on the guy, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's very clear cut who is going to be successful right away.
yeah,
Um, it's guys that are in good shape, right? Guys that are mentally tough, this exact thing that we were just talking about, that are not bothered by the weather, they're not bothered by the time of day, they're not bothered by um, their physical exhaustion. They're just focused on the task. They're focused on
yep,
hunting and nothing else. Um, it's typically going to be guys that have a positive mental attitude as well, like not just the toughness thing, but also like a little bit of optimism. People that are always looking and not expecting but anticipating that opportunity at any moment, right?
right.
Those guys tend to, and I don't know what that is. There's no I don't know how to. Guys that are positive kill more elk. I don't know why they do. I think they try
Yeah.
harder. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
yeah, they just stay tuned up, and I think that's something that's kind of unique to your type of hunting, Evan, or the part where keeping the longevity in the positivity going on.
yeah,
What I notice is guys who have done a lot of hunting that has immediate, either it works out or it doesn't. It could be high success rate hunting, or it could be hunting where it's like, oh, conditions are shitty, it's not going to work out. Like, they're used to that binary outcome. They don't do as well in your type of hunting because they'll be positive for a day or two
they're like,
days.
I should have killed one by now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And then it's all lost. But
yeah,
man, it doesn't even correlate to, it could be some guy who has like the cushiest life on planet Earth, right? Like, he's a CEO of a
yeah.
public company or something, and he's, catered to all the time. But just in his mind, he understands that this is a type of hunt that it only takes just a moment to change it.
You just need
You
to
know,
be present and open. You know what I
right,
mean? And I think that if I were to say why the positive attitude thing matters, that's probably why. Is it just puts people out there longer, and with a more receptive mindset than
right,
um, than the guys that are kind of looking for that are dejected and looking for excuses.
right.
Um,
Yep.
but I mean, that's it. There, three things, right? Like, you're in good shape, you're mentally tough, and you're positive throughout the hunt and present throughout the hunt.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
guy's gonna kill stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Sure, for sure.
Even
The
if he doesn't have the skills, even if he's from a
Yeah,
different
whatever.
background or whatever, those are the things to work on.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? Like, I totally agree with you, Evan, but none of those have to do with
How
reading the
competent you are
yeah,
on the mountain. Yeah.
yeah, reading the wind or how far you can shoot your
Yeah.
bow or like it just
Oh,
doesn't yeah.
yep.
No, it's interesting. The last question I'm gonna ask you, and this is I know you're uniquely qualified to answer because I feel like my analogous experience gave me some insight into this. But you've seen probably a lot of hunters that are repeat hunters that have hunted with you over the years. You've seen them change as elk hunters. But the other thing you've seen is you have seen guides that started out fairly naive and became pretty good elk hunters. And I think a lot of viewers and listeners to this they're not really getting prepared for one hunt, Evan. They're really viewing this as like a lifelong hobby.
Mhm.
And because of that, they view it as something they want to get up the learning curve as fast as they can. And so I know that it's highly variable amongst hunters, guides, whatever, how quickly they get good at this. Do you have
Mhm.
any insight on like why that is? Or what something, what people should focus on to get better quicker at it?
I had this discussion last year with a guide. Kind of a fun thing about me being in the position I'm in is I'm not Joe Business who came in here to run an outfit. I'm a
Right.
guide who's worked on every level through this thing, right? And
Sure.
and have obsessed about becoming a better guide myself.
Mhm.
Um, so like in our hiring and training of guides, I've really put a microscope on how can we teach these guys not just to be phenomenal elk guides, but for it to become like repeatable and trainable.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, sure.
um uh and and I've poured my heart into trying to develop guides. I've found that it doesn't matter how much teaching you do, experience is what really
Right.
hard seats the knowledge, right? And it does just take years, and you have to commit yourself to that process. That like, all right, I'm gonna gather information. I'm gonna listen to guys that know what they're talking about, but more importantly, I'm gonna understand that it just is gonna take a time commit. It's gonna take years before you hit any sort of swing.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
iteration.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Even
Yeah.
guys that are phenomenal hunters that are already better equipped than your standard do-it-yourself hunter, to really become assassins. Where it's like, um, I know every time I send somebody with them, they're bringing antlers back.
Yeah.
It's a multi-year process, and I had that discussion with a guide last year. He had gotten real down on himself because he'd gone a couple seasons without killing a bull,
Mhm.
and I got frustrated with him at one point because he was being depressed. He was like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, it's just and I kind of shook him and was like, look, man, if you don't love the process of elk hunting, don't do it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? If all you can think about is the results, if all you can think about is killing bulls, you're not ever going to learn how to kill bulls because you haven't
Yeah.
fallen in love with the process.
Here, you might get lucky once.
Right,
You might get
right.
lucky once,
You
but
have
it
you
don't
have to
count.
enjoy the
Yeah.
mental mind fuckery of
Yeah, sure.
learning through experience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you've gotta love it, and you've gotta engage and commit yourself to the process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's a great one to end on, Evan, because it's totally true, dude. And
Yeah,
particularly that
yeah,
type of hunting. One thing for sure now in this world, the type of hunting you're doing, anybody can do it. That's what makes it special. But it comes with this. It comes with this that there's really no shortcuts.
yeah,
I was talking to Kip Folks about this on the last podcast I did. Like, there's no shortcuts. You're gonna have to iterate on it and work at it to get better. You can kill
yep.
one every once in a while, and that's great, but you're not a master of it and have any consistency until you've iterated on it, studied on it, made it kind of like a lifelong passion. So for sure,
Uh,
man.
the beautiful thing, I think, Cliff, is if when a guy arrives to that point, right? If he's made it through the trenches and he's
Yeah.
started killing elk, it becomes so repeatable. I see it in guides, right?
Oh
Once
yeah.
they figure it out, it clicks and they have a program.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's why these like average success rates just don't mean anything.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, the like
yeah,
the data. I mean, people who look at these units and they try to pick them on success rate. It's like, dude, it doesn't
yeah,
matter because you have guys that have a 1% chance of
yeah,
success, and in the same
yeah,
unit, you have guys that have a 85%
yeah,
chance of success.
yeah,
Like it's really a drastic difference,
yeah.
you know. And that's what makes it cool though, because you can
That
improve.
I think it's what's great about over the counter elk hunting. It makes you an absolute weapon.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? You can take what you learn on over the counter elk hunting and apply it to any species, any region. I don't care. You're gonna be a hunter.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. Dude, well, even I mean, honestly, Evan, this is not to sound like an egomaniac on this front,
Yeah,
dude,
yeah.
but
That made I
but
realized when I said that that made
no,
me
no,
sound like
no, no,
a
dude, because here's the cold, hard reality of this deal. Like, if you take a guy who's been doing that type of hunting just in the elk world and you go put him on like a private ranch, like you better watch the guy because the fucker's gonna end up standing on like 10 dead bulls the first morning.
yeah,
Because he's just not you like he's just like, what is this?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a totally different dynamic, you know
yeah.
what I mean? And so but I think it's great because not just within elk, like the skill set, dealing with the hardship, all of that, it makes you where, yeah, of course, you have a lot to learn about different species, different topographies, all of that. Like there's tons to learn, but it's
Just got the
it's the
process.
it's the best base. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It really
yeah,
is the best base.
yeah,
So
yeah.
dude, I really appreciate your time, Evan. Let people
Yeah.
know where they can follow you, and we're gonna have to do another one, dude, on rifle stuff or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'd love it. You're killing it with these podcasts. They've been super entertaining.
Thanks,
Keep it
man.
up, man. Yeah, check me out. Evan Koster, manager of Flat Tops Wilderness Guides. You can go to ftguides.com or look at us on the social at Flat Tops Wilderness Guides on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, man.